The transport shuttle's engines hummed with a deep, resonant vibration that Sarah Chen felt in her bones as Kepler Station grew larger in the viewport. The massive orbital facility hung against the starfield like a geometric flower, its 8 arms radiating from a central hub, each section dedicated to housing different atmospheric requirements for the galaxy's diverse species. Sarah pressed her palm against the cool, transparent steel, watching docking bays illuminate in sequence as traffic controllers guided vessels through the careful choreography of interstellar commerce and military operations. "First time seeing a multi-species facility?" asked the shuttle pilot, a gruff Terran merchant marine whose weathered face spoke of decades navigating the void between worlds. "First time leaving Earth's system," Sarah admitted, though her voice carried none of the nervousness that might be expected from a 19-year-old on her first interstellar journey. Her dark eyes tracked the movement patterns of various ship types with the same focused intensity she'd once used to navigate the gang territories of Neo-Singapore's vertical slums. The pilot grunted approval. "You picked a hell of a place to start. Galactic Defense Academy doesn't take just anyone. What's your specialty?" Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Combat operations and tactical analysis." "Huh. Most humans who make it into GDA are engineers or medics. Combat slots usually go to the Kadarans or Saurians." The pilot's tone carried a question he was too polite to voice directly. Before Sarah could respond, the CUM system crackled to life with the station's automated docking procedures, delivered in the clipped, precise cadence of Etherian standard. Sarah listened with growing unease as protests erupted from various species representatives, their translated voices filling the passenger compartment through the shuttle's speakers. "Unprecedented security risk. Deathworld species have no place in civilized military training. Emotional instability inherent to their evolutionary psychology." The pilot winced and reached to mute the feed. But Sarah caught his wrist with a grip that made him reconsider. Her fingers were slim but carried surprising strength, and there was something in her stillness that reminded him uncomfortably of a coiled spring. "Let it play," she said quietly. The protests continued as their shuttle joined the queue for docking. Bay 7. A crystalline silicate representative's harmonic voice resonated through the speakers. "Humans lack the specialized adaptations that qualify other species for advanced military roles. They possess no natural armor, limited sensory capabilities, and demonstrate concerning aggressive tendencies. This admission sets a dangerous precedent." A deeper voice, thick with the growling undertones of Kadaran speech, rumbled through the translation matrix. "The Deathworlder's homeworld produces nothing but conflict and environmental destruction. Such beings cannot be trusted with galactic security responsibilities." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her free hand unconsciously traced the faded scar along her left. Forearm a memento from a territorial dispute in Sector 7's underground markets. She'd been 15 then, caught between rival syndicates when a deal went sideways. The Yakuza lieutenant who'd given her that scar had underestimated the scrappy street kid right up until she'd put him through a reinforced window 3 stories. Above the neon-lit street, politicians, the pilot muttered. Finally successful in his attempt to switch off the feed. "Don't let them get to you, kid. You earned your slot fair and square, or you wouldn't be here." Sarah released his wrist and settled back into her acceleration couch. "I know." But as the shuttle's docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk that resonated through the hull, she wondered if knowing would be enough. Earth's communication blackout due to the ongoing solar storm activity meant she had no backup, no government liaison to smooth diplomatic waters if things went wrong. She was entirely on her own, representing not just herself but her entire species. Potential future in galactic military operations, the airlock cycled with a series of mechanical clicks and pneumatic hisses. Sarah shouldered her single duffel bag. Everything she owned fit inside and followed the pilot through the umbilical into Kepler Station proper. The arrival bay buzzed with controlled chaos. Beings of a dozen different species moved through the space with purpose, their varied forms creating a living kaleidoscope of evolutionary diversity. Tall, graceful Aquarians glided past on legs adapted for both terrestrial and aquatic locomotion, their scaled skin shimmering with chromatophore patterns that conveyed emotional states. A group of Etherians floated nearby, their semi-translucent forms barely contained. Within environmental suits that maintained the low-pressure atmosphere their species required. Sarah's presence drew immediate attention. Conversations paused as various beings registered the newcomer's species, their reactions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. She walked with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being watched, her posture relaxed but ready. Years of navigating dangerous streets had taught her to project calm while remaining prepared for violence to erupt at any moment. Cadet Chen? The voice belonged to a towering Saurian, whose reptilian features were partially hidden beneath the instructor's insignia of the Galactic Defense Academy. His scales were a deep green-black that seemed to absorb light, and his vertical pupils tracked Sarah's movement with predatory precision. "I am Instructor Vexstar. Welcome to Kepler Station." "Thank you, sir." Sarah's response was crisp, professional. Vexstar's head tilted slightly, studying her with an expression that might have been curiosity or concern. "Your species' reputation precedes you. The Academy Board was divided on your admission. Aware of the political situation, sir, are you?" The Saurian's voice carried undertones that the translation matrix couldn't quite capture. "The beings you'll be training alongside represent apex predators from worlds across the galaxy. Kadaran's strength can crush steel. Silicate durability makes them nearly indestructible. Etherian telepathic abilities provide tactical advantages your species cannot match. What makes you believe you can compete?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. In the vertical cities of Earth, showing weakness invited attack. Here, surrounded by beings whose capabilities she didn't fully understand, that lesson felt more relevant than ever. "I guess we'll find out, sir." Something flickered in Vexstar's reptilian features approval, perhaps, or recognition. "Indeed, we will. Follow me. Orientation begins in 1 hour, and you'll want to secure your quarters first. Fair warning, cadet. Accommodation assignments are based on atmospheric and dietary requirements. You'll be housed with the other oxygen-breathing species." As they walked through the station's corridors, Sarah noted the architectural details with the same systematic the tension she'd once used to map gang territories, emergency stations, intersection sightlines, potential choke points information that might prove crucial if diplomacy failed and survival became the priority behind them. Conversations resumed in dozens of languages and communication methods, but Sarah caught enough translated fragments to understand the general sentiment. The galaxy's military elite were watching humanity's first, representative with a mixture of skepticism and concern. She'd faced worse odds in Neo-Singapore's underground. At least here, the rules of engagement were clearly defined. The combat simulation chamber hummed with energy as holographic targets materialized in a complex, three-dimensional maze. Sarah crouched behind cover, her breathing steady and controlled as she surveyed the tactical scenario. Around her 20th, other cadets prepared for the advanced combat assessment, each representing the military elite of their respective species. Scenario parameters: urban pacification, mixed terrain, civilian population present. Announced the chamber's AI in clinical Etherian standard. Objective: neutralize hostile forces while minimizing collateral damage. Time limit: 15 minutes. Begin. Sarah moved immediately, but not with the explosive speed of Yorvak, the massive Kadaran whose Ursan frame crashed through the holographic environment like a living battering ram. Nor did she display the ethereal grace of Lotharia, the Aquarian whose fluid movements seemed to defy gravity itself. Instead, she advanced with methodical precision, her dark eyes constantly scanning for threats, while her mind processed sightlines, civilian positions, and optimal approach routes. The first hostile appeared around a corner, a holographic insurgent carrying a plasma rifle. Before Sarah could acquire the target, a crystalline shard whistled past her ear, striking the enemy center mass with lethal accuracy. Silicate Cadet, whose body was composed of living mineral matrices, retracted the projectile back into her form with a sound like wind chimes. "Target neutralized," Zixandra announced, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of satisfaction. "Humans should observe proper targeting protocols before advancing." Sarah bit back her first response, instead filing away the tactical information. Silicates could launch and retrieve projectiles from their own bodies, giving them both ranged attack capability and the ability to reclaim ammunition. Useful intelligence for later scenarios. The assessment continued for 12 minutes and 30 seconds. When the simulation ended, Sarah found herself in the middle of the performance rankings 8th out of 24 cadets. Respectable, but unremarkable. Yorvac had claimed first place by systematically demolishing every piece of cover the insurgents might use, while Letharia's second-place finish reflected her species' natural ability to move through any terrain with minimal sound or disturbance. Adequate, Instructor Vexstar commented as the cadets assembled for debrief. His reptilian gaze swept across the group before settling on Sarah. Cadet Chen demonstrated acceptable tactical awareness and civilian protection protocols. However, her completion time suggests inefficient target acquisition relative to species with enhanced sensory capabilities. Sarah nodded acknowledgement, but inwardly she reflected on what the instructor hadn't said. While other cadets excelled in their natural environments, she'd noticed something none of them seemed to recognize. Every scenario could be adapted to, if you understood the underlying patterns. Cadarans dominated in direct assault situations. Aquarians excelled in fluid terrain. Etherians provided telepathic coordination. And silicates offered mobile cover and projectile attacks. But what happened when the environment didn't favor any particular species' advantages? That question would be answered 2 days later during environmental adaptation training. The Academy's biodomes could simulate conditions from across the galaxy. For the morning session, Instructor Vexstar selected a high-gravity scenario modeled after the gravitite. Homeworld 3x standard galactic gravity in a thin atmosphere. Environment with limited visibility due to perpetual dust storms. The gravitite cadets moved through the scenario like they were strolling through a garden. Their dense muscular forms had evolved for exactly these conditions. Most other species struggled significantly, their movements becoming sluggish and labored. Even Jorvak, despite his strength, found the environment challenging. Sarah surprised everyone, including herself, by adapting within minutes. Her movements remained economical and efficient. And while she couldn't match the gravitite's native ability, she completed the scenario with the third best time overall. The afternoon brought aquatic combat training in the Aquarian Dome. Here, Letharia and her species mates moved like liquid poetry, their every action perfectly suited to three-dimensional underwater maneuvering. Again, Sarah found herself adapting faster than expected, her score climbing to 5th place despite having no natural aquatic adaptations. By the end of the week, a pattern had emerged that unsettled both cadets and instructors. While Sarah never claimed first place in any scenario, she consistently performed well, regardless of environmental conditions. Her scores were remarkably stable across drastically different challenges, statistical anomaly that began drawing unwanted attention. "It's unnatural," Sarah overheard Jorvac growling to a group of cadets in the mess hall. The Cadaran's massive form hunched over a protein synthesizer as he consumed his evening meal. Deathworlders aren't supposed to be generalists. Every proper species has specialized adaptations. What kind of evolutionary pressure creates something that's merely adequate at everything? Zixandra's crystalline form chimed with harmonic agreement. Biological adaptation requires environmental pressure toward specific survival traits. Humans appear to lack focused evolutionary development, suggesting either incomplete evolution or genetic instability. Sarah continued eating her meal, mechanically working through the nutritionally balanced but flavorless ration while listening to the conversation. She'd heard variations of this discussion every day since arriving at the Academy. The other species couldn't understand how humans fit into the galactic ecosystem. Where were their specialized abilities, their unique evolutionary advantages? What they didn't understand, what she was only beginning to recognize herself, was that adaptation itself might be humanity's specialization. The realization crystallized during the following week's disaster response exercise. A simulated reactor breach in the station's engineering section required evacuation of injured personnel through multiple environmental zones. Teams would need to navigate standard atmosphere, high radiation areas, low gravity, maintenance shafts, and aquatic cooling systems before reaching safety. The exercise was designed to require cooperation between multiple species, each contributing their specialized abilities to overcome environmental challenges suited to their evolution. No single cadet was expected to handle every phase of the evacuation. Sarah watched her teammates struggle as they moved between zones. Cadarans excelled in the high radiation areas, but became sluggish in low gravity. Quarians dominated the flooded sections, but couldn't handle the radiation exposure. Etherians provided excellent coordination, but their environmental suits limited their mobility in tight spaces. She found herself unconsciously taking point during transitions, her movements remaining consistent regardless of environmental conditions. When Treyek, an Etherian cadet, stumbled in the maintenance shaft due to his species' unfamiliarity with confined spaces, Sarah was there to steady him. When Jorvak's massive frame couldn't navigate the narrow passages between cooling systems, she scouted alternative routes. By the exercise's end, their team had achieved the second-best evacuation time overall. But Sarah noticed the looks she was getting from her teammates, not gratitude, but something closer to unease. That evening, she found herself alone in the observation deck, staring out at the starfield while processing the day's events. The facility's rotation created artificial gravity, but she could see other sections of the station where different species lived in their preferred gravitational and atmospheric conditions. Cadet Chen. Instructor Vextar's voice carried a note she hadn't heard before, something that might have been concern, sir. The Saurian joined her at the viewport, his predatory stillness somehow complementing her own watchful calm. You're developing a reputation among the other cadets. I'm aware, sir. They don't understand what they're seeing. Neither, I suspect. Do you? Vextar's vertical pupils tracked a passing transport. Your species' admission to this academy was ... controversial. There are those who believe humans represent an unpredictable element in galactic military operations. Sarah considered her response carefully. And what do you believe, sir? The instructor's laugh was a sound like grinding stone. I believe the galaxy may have severely underestimated what environmental pressure actually shaped your species' evolution. The question is whether that realization comes before or after someone decides to test exactly how dangerous a death can be. As if summoned by his words, Jorvak's distinctive growl echoed from the corridor behind them. The Cadaran was addressing someone in the low, rumbling tones his species used when discussing matters of significant importance. Make her understand she doesn't belong here before the situation escalates beyond political solutions. Sarah felt a familiar tension settle between her shoulder blades, the same awareness that had once warned her when gang territories were about to erupt into open warfare. She'd hoped the academy would be different from the streets of Neo-Singapore. She was beginning to suspect that predators were predators, regardless of how civilized the environment appeared. He summons to Commander Talshin's office arrived during Sarah's third week at the academy, delivered by a nervous Etherian aide whose translucent form flickered with agitation patterns. Sarah had been reviewing tactical manuals in the multi-species library, referencing combat doctrine from different worlds. When the message arrived with the crisp efficiency that marked all official academy communications, Cadet Chen, report to Command Level 7 immediately. Sarah watched the level indicators climb while mentally cataloging possible reasons for the summons. Her performance scores remained consistently acceptable. Her conduct record was clean. And she'd avoided the increasingly frequent confrontations with xenophobic cadets by the simple expedient of being elsewhere when tensions escalated. Commander Talshin's office occupied a prime location with viewports overlooking the Academy's main docking bays. The commander herself was a striking example of Saurian evolution taller than Instructor Vextar, with scales that shifted between deep blue and silver depending on the angle of observation. Her reputation as a strategic genius had earned respect across multiple species, which made her current expression of barely controlled frustration all the more concerning. Cadet Chen, Talshin's voice, carried the authority of someone accustomed to managing interstellar military operations. I prefer to stand, sir. The commander's head tilted slightly a gesture. Sarah had learned indicated either amusement or threat assessment among Saurians. Very well, I'll be direct. We have a problem. The holographic display above Talshin's desk activated, showing a complex web of diplomatic communications, political pressure indicators, and what appeared to be intercepted intelligence reports. Sarah recognized Earth's solar system at the center of several concerning data streams. Your homeworld's communication blackout has created an unfortunate situation, Talshin continued, manipulating the display to highlight specific data points. Several member species have questioned the validity of your admission credentials, without direct confirmation from Earth's government. Some representatives are suggesting your presence here violates Academy admission protocols. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but internally she felt the familiar tightness that preceded dangerous situations. What kind of confirmation do they require, sir? Verification of your species' military capabilities, psychological stability, assessments, and formal endorsement from your planetary government. Talshin's claws clicked against her desk surface. Standard requirements for first contact military integration, requirements that were waived during your initial admission process. The implications crystallized immediately. They're looking for reasons to expel me. Certain factions, yes. The commander's scales shifted toward darker hues. The Kadaran representative has been particularly vocal about what he terms uncontrolled Deathworld integration. He's gained support from several species who view humans as an unknown quantity. Sarah studied the political web displayed above them. What's the timeline? The Administrative Council meets in 72 hours to review your status. If Earth's government cannot be reached for verification, Talshin let the sentence hang unfinished. I'll be removed from the Academy. Most likely, yes. And given the current political climate, it's unlikely another human would be admitted for the foreseeable future. The weight of representing her entire species had been a constant pressure since arriving at Kepler Station. Now it threatened to crush what might be humanity's only chance at galactic military integration. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, but every scenario led to the same conclusion. She was completely dependent on forces beyond her control. Is there anything I can do to influence the decision? Commander Talshin's expression softened slightly. Maintain exemplary conduct. Avoid any incidents that might support the narrative that humans are unstable or dangerous. The Council will be watching for any excuse to validate their concerns. Sarah nodded and turned to leave, but the commander's voice stopped her at the door. Cadet Chen, for what it's worth, I believe your admission was justified. Your performance here has been ... illuminating. The return journey to the Academy's main levels felt like descending into hostile territory. Word of the political situation had somehow spread through the cadet population with the speed that characterized military communities. Conversations stopped when Sarah passed, replaced by the kind of watching silence that preceded violence in Neo-Singapore's gang territories. She found sanctuary in the advanced tactical theory classroom, arriving early for the afternoon session. The room was designed to accommodate multiple species, with adjustable seating configurations and atmospheric controls that could shift between different environmental requirements. Sarah chose a seat near the back, positioning herself where she could observe the entire room while maintaining clear sight lines to all exits. Krelock arrived shortly after, the insectoid THRI Kreen's compound eyes tracking Sarah's location before he selected a nearby seat. Unlike most cadets, Krelock had never shown hostility toward her presence. His species' hive mind heritage seemed to make them less susceptible to the territorial instincts that drove other beings' xenophobia. The political currents are turbulent, Krelock observed, his mandibles clicking, and what Sarah had learned indicated concern. Many of the large species cadets speak of action rather than patience. What kind of action? Jorvak believes that if your conduct record included significant disciplinary incidents, the Council's decision would become inevitable. The Three Queen's head rotated slightly, bringing more of his visual spectrum to bear on Sarah's position. He has been gathering support from others who share his perspective. Zixandra supports him, as does Thunder from the Gravitite delegation. The Nebulite has expressed interest. They speak of teaching you to understand your place in the galactic hierarchy. 4 against 1, Sarah's mind automatically began calculating tactical considerations. Jorvak's massive strength, Zixandra's projectile capabilities, Thunderesque dense gravitational adaptations, and Vexmill's gaseous form contained within an environmental suit that likely included defensive systems. Each opponent possessed natural advantages that her species lacked. But advantages could become disadvantages if you understood the underlying mechanics. When? She asked quietly. Soon, Jorvak grows impatient with subtle approaches. He believes direct confrontation will reveal what he calls your true Deathworlder nature, and provide justification for your removal. Other cadets began filing into the classroom, their conversations creating a background hum of multiple languages filtered through translation matrices. Sarah noticed the seating patterns, species clustering together, with notable gaps around her own position. The isolation was intentional, designed to make her feel vulnerable and unwelcome. Yorvac entered with his usual thunderous stride, his ursine frame dominating the space near the door. His small eyes swept the room before settling on Sarah with unmistakable hostility. Behind him came Zixandra, her crystalline form chiming softly with each step, followed by Thunder, whose dense musculature made even Yorvac appear lean by comparison. Vexmil drifted in last, the nebulite's gaseous form contained within a sophisticated environmental suit that hummed with contained energy. The four of them spread throughout the classroom in what appeared to be casual positioning but struck Sarah as calculated tactical deployment. Instructor Vexstar arrived precisely on schedule, his reptilian features betraying no awareness of the tension that filled the room like an approaching storm. Today's lesson focuses on battlefield psychology and threat assessment, he announced, activating the room's holographic displays. We'll examine how environmental factors and species psychology interact during high-stress combat situations. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah as Vexstar began his lecture on predator-prey dynamics and territorial behavior. She found herself conducting a real-time threat assessment of her own situation. For hostile cadets, unknown weapons capabilities, confined space with limited escape routes, and political pressure that would view any violent incident as proof of human instability. The lecture continued for 47 minutes. Sarah absorbed the tactical information while maintaining peripheral awareness of her potential opponent's positions. Jorvac had shifted closer during the session, using questions about Kadaran military doctrine as cover for repositioning. Zixandra's crystalline form had oriented towards Sarah's location, ready to launch projectiles with minimal targeting delay. Thunder remained near the main door, effectively blocking the primary exit route. Vexmil's environmental suit emitted a barely audible hum that suggested internal systems cycling to higher readiness states. Your assignment for tomorrow, Instructor, Vexstar concluded, is to analyze the tactical scenario we've discussed and propose countermeasures for each species-specific threat profile. Class dismissed. The classroom fell silent, except for the soft hum of environmental systems and the barely audible whir of Vexmil's life support apparatus. Sarah remained seated, her hands resting calmly on the desk surface, while her peripheral vision tracked the positions of her four potential opponents. The holographic battlefield display still flickered above Instructor Vexstar's podium, frozen on an analysis of predator ambush tactics. Yorvac rose first, his massive Kadaran frame unfolding with deliberate intimidation. At nearly 3 meters, tall and built like a fusion-powered construction mech, he represented the kind of overwhelming physical force that had made his species legendary across the galaxy, his small, intelligent eyes fixed on Sarah with predatory focus. "Deathworlder," he rumbled, his voice carrying the subsonic harmonics that Kadarans use to establish dominance. "We need to discuss your situation." Sarah's heart rate remained steady at 68 beats per minute, the same controlled rhythm she'd maintained during knife fights in Neo-Singapore's vertical slums. "I'm listening," Zixandra's crystalline form chimed as she shifted position, her mineral matrices catching and refracting the classroom's lighting into fractured rainbows. "Your presence here violates natural order," the silicate declared, her harmonic voice resonating with crystalline certainty. "Each species has earned their place through evolutionary superiority. Humans possess no such qualifications." Thunder moved with surprising grace for someone whose dense physiology was adapted to crushing gravitational forces. The gravitite's muscle fibers were so compressed that his relatively human-sized frame contained the mass of a small vehicle. He positioned himself between Sarah and the main exit, his movements economical and purposeful. "The galaxy maintains balance through proper hierarchy," Thunder stated, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to high-pressure environments. "Deathworlders disrupt that balance." Vexmil's environmental suit released a soft hiss. As internal atmospheric processors adjusted his contained environment, The nebulite's gaseous form swirled within the suit's transparent sections, and Sarah could see defensive systems cycling to active status. Unlike the others, Vexmill remained silent, but his positioning near the secondary exit completed the tactical encirclement. Sarah stood slowly, her movements fluid and controlled. To an outside observer, she might have appeared relaxed, even casual. But every muscle fiber in her body had shifted into the hyper-aware state that preceded life-or-death combat. Her vision sharpened, time seemed to slow, and her mind began calculating angles, distances, and vulnerabilities with the cold precision of a targeting computer. "So what exactly are you proposing?" she asked, her voice carrying none of the tension that coiled through her nervous system. Yorvak took a step forward, using his size to create psychological pressure. A demonstration. "Show the Council that humans cannot control their violent impulses when threatened. Give them the justification they need to remove your kind from civilized space. And if I refuse..." Zixandra's crystalline laugh sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Deathworlders always choose violence. It is their nature. We simply provide the appropriate stimulus." The attack began with Yorvak's charge. The massive Kadaran moved with surprising speed for his size, closing the distance between them in 2 thunderous strides. His right arm swept toward Sarah in a backhand that could have shattered reinforced concrete intended to knock her across. The room and establish immediate dominance, Sarah's combat reflexes, honed by years of survival in environments where hesitation meant death, exploded into action. She dropped beneath Yorvak's swing, her legs coiling and releasing like compressed springs. Her entire body became a weapon as she drove upward, her left shoulder impacting the nerve cluster beneath the Kadaran's armpit with surgical precision. The blow disrupted the major neural pathway controlling his right arm, while her right hand grabbed his extended wrist, using his own momentum and massive weight against him. Physics became her ally. Yorvak's charge carried him forward, while Sarah's leverage sent him into a controlled rotation. She stepped into the movement, her foot hooking behind his knee as she guided his massive frame toward the deck with unstoppable force. The impact, when 300 kilograms of muscle and bone struck the reinforced flooring, resonated through the entire classroom. But Sarah was already moving. Zixandra had begun launching crystalline projectiles the moment Yorvak committed. To his attack, razor-sharp mineral shards whistled through the air where Sarah had been standing, but she was no longer there. She rolled across Yorvak's prone form, using his body as cover while closing distance with the silicate. Zixandra's species could launch projectiles from their bodies, but they required a moment to generate and aim each shot. Sarah gave her no such luxury. She came up from her roll in a sprint, covering the 3 meters between them before the silicate could adjust her targeting parameters. The key to defeating a silicate, Sarah realized with crystal clarity, was understanding their crystalline structure. Beautiful, durable, but inherently brittle along specific fracture planes. Her strike targeted the primary junction in Zixandra's shoulder matrix, the point where multiple crystal formations met and created structural weakness. The impact sent harmonic resonance through Zixandra's entire form. Crystal matrices that had withstood meteor impacts and plasma fire shattered along their natural fault lines. The silicate's screams sounded like 1,000 breaking glasses as her right arm collapsed into fragments, disrupting her ability to maintain coherent form. Thunder was already moving, his dense physiology allowing him to accelerate despite the crushing gravity he carried within his own muscle fibers. Sarah spun to face him, her mind processing his attack vector in the microseconds available. Were virtually unstoppable in direct confrontation. Their dense musculature could crush steel, and their bone structure could withstand forces that would pulverize other species. But density was also their weakness. They carried their own gravitational field, which meant they fell faster and harder than anything else in the room. Sarah didn't try to stop Thunder's charge. Instead, she redirected it. Her foot caught the edge of an overturned desk, launching it into Thunder's path at precisely the right angle and velocity. The gravitite's own momentum carried him into the obstacle, but Sarah had already calculated the physics. His dense physiology meant he couldn't stop or change direction quickly enough to avoid the collision. The desk exploded into fragments, but the impact sent Thunder stumbling. Sarah was there to meet him, her hands gripping his uniform as she used his forward momentum to guide him toward the reinforced wall. Gravitite bone structure could withstand tremendous pressure, but it followed the same physics as everything else. Force plus acceleration plus an immovable object equaled unconsciousness. The impact when thunder struck the wall created a spiderweb of cracks in the reinforced material. His dense frame slid to the floor, stunned but breathing. Vexmill had been moving throughout Sarah's engagement with the others, his gaseous form contained within the environmental suit, giving him mobility advantages. But Sarah had been tracking him with peripheral awareness, and she understood his species' capabilities better than he realized. Nebulites were essentially living gas clouds contained within technological frameworks. Their environmental suits were marvels of engineering. But they had one critical vulnerability: the power coupling that maintained atmospheric pressure and life support systems. Sarah's final movement was a controlled dive that brought her within arm's reach of Vex_Mills' suit. Her fingers found the power coupling's emergency release a safety feature designed to prevent catastrophic failure but accessible from the outside. For rescue operations, the coupling disengaged with a sharp click, followed immediately by the suit's emergency protocols activating Veximil's gaseous form, left him effectively immobilized and struggling to maintain consciousness. Sarah straightened, her breathing slightly elevated but still controlled. Around her, 4 of the galaxy's military elite lay neutralized Jorvac, groaning as he tried to restore feeling to his dislocated shoulder. Zixandra's crystalline form partially collapsed and sparking with disrupted energy patterns. Thunder unconscious against the cracked wall, and Vexmill trapped within his emergency life support protocols. The classroom's security sensors had recorded everything with mechanical precision. When Academy security arrived 30 seconds later, they found Sarah standing calmly beside the instructor's podium, her hands visible and her posture non-threatening. "I'll need to report this incident," the senior security officer stated, his Etherean features displaying confusion and concern in equal measure. "Of course," Sarah replied, "though I should mention that Cadet Jorvac initiated physical contact. Everything afterward was defensive response." As medical teams arrived to treat the injured cadets, Sarah reflected on a sobering realization. The engagement had lasted 11.7 seconds according to the security timestamp. 11.7 seconds to neutralize for opponents, whose species had conquered worlds and dominated galactic military operations for centuries. The medical bay hummed with activity as species-specific treatment protocols addressed the injuries Sarah had inflicted. Through the transparent aluminum viewing panel, she watched Dr. Silfara, the Academy's chief medical officer, coordinate care for 4 cadets whose conditions ranged from dislocated joints to structural crystalline damage. Sarah sat in the security office's waiting area, her hands resting calmly in her lap, while Academy officials processed what the incident reports were. Already calling the classroom engagement, the formal language couldn't disguise the shock. Rippling through Kepler Station's command structure, in less than 12 seconds, a single human cadet had neutralized 4 opponents whose species had built reputations as galactic military powerhouses. Cadet Chen. Commander Talshin's voice carried new undertones that Sarah couldn't quite identify. "Please join me." The commander's office felt different, now not hostile, but charged with the kind of tension that preceded paradigm shifts. Talshin gestured toward a chair, but Sarah remained standing, her posture alert but not. "The security footage has been reviewed by the Academy board." Talshin began activating a holographic display that showed the classroom engagement from multiple angles. "Your actions have created a significant ... complication." Sarah watched herself move through the recorded violence with detached analysis. From the external perspective, her responses appeared even more devastating than they had felt in real. Each movement was economical, precise, and utterly without hesitation. The contrast between her controlled demeanor and the explosive efficiency of her actions was jarring. "The medical reports confirm that all 4 cadets will recover fully," Talshin continued. "However, the nature of their injuries has raised questions that extend far beyond Academy disciplinary procedures." The holographic display shifted to show detailed analyses of each takedown. Jorvac's shoulder dislocation had been achieved through precise nerve disruption rather than brute force. Zixandra's crystalline structure had been compromised along fracture planes that required intimate knowledge of silicate physiology. Thunder's unconsciousness resulted from calculated impact dynamics that took his dense bone structure into account. Vexmill's incapacitation demonstrated understanding of nebulite life support technology that even some engineers lacked. How? Talchin asked simply. Sarah considered her response carefully. Pattern recognition and adaptive response. Each species has advantages, but advantages become predictable. Predictable becomes exploitable. In 11.7 seconds, combat doesn't allow for extended analysis time. Talchin's scales shifted through a spectrum of colors that Sarah was beginning to recognize as deep thought. The board has been debating your status for 6 hours. Several factions view your actions as confirmation that humans are uncontrollable violence, and the others are asking different questions. The commander manipulated the display to show tactical analyses that had clearly been prepared by military professionals. Questions about how a species with no apparent specializations could analyze and defeat multiple specialists simultaneously. Questions about what kind of evolutionary pressure creates such capabilities. The office door chimed, admitting, "Instructor Vexstar," whose reptilian features betrayed unusual agitation. "Commander, the intelligence analysis is complete. Proceed." Vexstar activated a separate holographic display showing what appeared to be comprehensive data files on Earth's biosphere. And evolutionary history, we've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about human evolution. Our initial assessments classified Earth as a standard Class 7 Deathworld hostile environment. Dangerous fauna, but within normal parameters for species development. Sarah felt a chill of anticipation as classified data streams populated. The display, we were wrong. Earth isn't just a Deathworld. It's an apex Deathworlder planetary environment, so consistently lethal that it produced not specialized predators, but adaptive survivors capable of dominating any ecological niche. Vexstar's voice carried undertones of something approaching awe. Humans didn't evolve to excel in specific environments. They evolved to excel in any environment where survival was at stake. The display showed evolutionary timelines, extinction, events, and adaptation patterns that painted a picture of relentless environmental pressure spanning millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic cataclysms, cosmic impacts, and ecological collapses that would have driven most species extinct had instead forged humanity into something unique in the galaxy's recorded history. Persistence hunters, Vexstar continued, capable of tracking prey across any terrain until exhaustion made them vulnerable. Pack coordinators who could adapt social structures to any challenge. Tool users who could fabricate weapons from any available materials. And when cooperation failed, he gestured toward the security footage. Apex predators capable of analyzing and defeating any threat through pure adaptability. Commander Talchin studied the data with the focused intensity of someone whose worldview was undergoing fundamental revision. What are the strategic implications? Humans represent the galaxy's first truly universal soldiers, Vexstar replied. Every other species requires specific environmental or technological support to operate at peak efficiency. Humans appear to reach peak efficiency when survival is threatened, regardless of circumstances. Sarah listened to the analysis with growing understanding. Her performance at the Academy competent, but unremarkable in peaceful training scenarios. Devastating when actual threat presented itself wasn't an anomaly. It was exactly what millions of years of evolutionary pressure had designed her to do. "There's more," Vexstar added, his expression growing even more serious. "We've detected increased military activity from several member species. The Kadaran delegation has been in contact with their homeworld's defense forces. Similar communications have been intercepted from silicate and gravitite representatives. They're afraid," Talchin concluded. "Terrified would be more accurate. The classroom engagement has been classified by multiple governments as a strategic intelligence event. Military analysts across the galaxy are trying to understand what humanity represents as a potential ally or enemy." Sarah felt the weight of her species' future settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "What's the board's decision?" Talchin and Vexstar exchanged glances that carried volumes of unspoken communication. "The original disciplinary hearing has been superseded by larger concerns," the commander replied. Your actions were clearly defensive, and the security footage supports your version of events. However, the political ramifications extend far beyond Academy jurisdiction. Several species are demanding your immediate expulsion and humanity's permanent exclusion from galactic military institutions, Vexstar added. They argue that your capabilities represent an unacceptable security risk, and the alternative, full integration. Talshin replied, recognition of humanity as a Type 1 military species with all associated privileges and responsibilities. The galaxy has only recognized 12 Type 1 species in recorded history. Sarah understood the implications immediately. Type 1. Classification meant access to advanced military technology, strategic partnership agreements, and influence in galactic defense policy. It also meant becoming a target for every species that feared humanity's potential. The final decision rests with the Galactic Council, Talshin continued. They've requested a formal demonstration of human military capabilities. What kind of demonstration? Vexstar's predatory smile held no warmth. Full combat assessment against volunteer opponents from multiple species. Live weapons, real stakes, minimal restrictions. They want to understand exactly what kind of predator evolution created on Earth. Through the office's viewports, Sarah could see the running lights of ships departing Kepler Station. Word of the classroom engagement was spreading through diplomatic channels, and the galaxy was choosing sides. Some species saw opportunity in alliance with humanity's adaptive capabilities. Others saw existential threat that required elimination. When Sarah asked, 72 hours. The assessment will be broadcast to every member world, and the results will determine humanity's future in galactic civilization. Talshin's scales had settled into patterns that Sarah recognized as grim determination. No pressure. Sarah almost smiled at the understatement. In 3 days, she would face opponents specifically chosen to test the limits of human adaptability. The galaxy would watch her performance and decide whether humanity deserved partnership or required containment. She thought about the streets of Neo-Singapore, where survival had been a daily question and violence was just another tool for solving problems. The Academy had seemed like escape from that brutal simplicity, but now she realized it had been preparation. 11.7 seconds had changed everything. Now she had 72 hours to prove that humanity belonged among the stars, or ensure that Earth remained forever isolated from galactic civilization. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn what kind of predator 3 billion years of evolutionary pressure had created. The combat assessment arena on Kepler Station had been designed to test the military capabilities of the galaxy's most dangerous species. Its adaptive environment could simulate any planetary condition, from the crushing depths of Aquarian Ocean worlds to the crystalline my-cities of silicate colonies. Today, it would host a demonstration that would determine humanity's place in galactic civilization. Sarah stood in the preparation chamber, reviewing the tactical parameters that had been established by the Galactic Council. 6 opponents each, representing different military doctrines and evolutionary specializations. Live weapons with non-lethal settings, but capable of causing serious injury. Victory conditions neutralize all opponents or survive for 30 minutes against coordinated assault. The viewing galleries above the arena were packed with representatives from 47 species, military analysts, and diplomatic observers. Every major power in the galaxy had sent their finest strategic minds to witness what Commander Talshin had privately described as the most important combat demonstration in recorded history. Cadet Chen, Instructor Vexstar's voice carried new respect that had developed over the past 3 days. The opposition team has been finalized. Sarah reviewed the holographic profiles with clinical detachment. Each opponent had been selected to counter specific aspects of human capability. A Kadaran heavy assault specialist to test her ability to handle overwhelming force. An Etherian telepath to challenge her mental defenses. A Saurian tactical coordinator, whose species had perfected ambush warfare. An Aquarian mobility expert, adapted for 3-dimensional combat. A Gravitite close-quarters specialist. And most concerning, a 3-Kreen hive mind representative whose coordinated multi-body awareness could predict and counter adaptive responses. They're not taking chances, Sarah observed. The galaxy's military leaders want definitive answers, Vexstar replied. Several species have argued that your academy performance was anomalous, that humans might excel in brief encounters but lack the sustained capability required for extended operations. Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper implications. If she faltered, humanity would be classified as a minor species suitable for limited auxiliary roles. If she succeeded to isolate, some factions would argue for humanity's immediate containment as an existential threat. There is one additional factor, Vextar continued, his reptilian features betraying concern. Earth's communication blackout ended 6 hours ago. Your government has been informed of the situation. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt genuinely surprised. What was their response? Direct communication from your species' military? Leadership. They've authorized full disclosure of human combat capabilities. Vextar activated a secure display showing classified files that made Sarah's breath catch. The galaxy is about to learn exactly what your species has been hiding. The files detailed humanity's actual military history, not the sanitized version submitted with Sarah's Academy application, but the raw reality of a species that had perfected warfare across every conceivable environment. Urban combat in vertical cities, asymmetric warfare in post-apocalyptic wastelands, naval operations across hostile oceans, aerial combat in radioactive atmospheres, and space-based operations around dying stars. Your leaders want the galaxy to understand that you're not an anomaly, Vextar explained. You're a representative sample of what 3 billion years of evolutionary pressure produced. The arena's announcement system activated, transmitting simultaneously to every viewing gallery and diplomatic channel in the system. Combat assessment commencing in 60 seconds. Participants take positions. Sarah walked onto the arena floor, her movements calm and purposeful. The adaptive environment had been configured as an urban warfare scenario, multi-level structures providing cover and elevation advantages. Environmental hazards, including electrical conduits and unstable surfaces, and multiple approach vectors that would test three-dimensional tactical thinking. Her opponents were already in position, their coordination evident in the way they distributed themselves throughout the arena. The three-crin hive mind had taken a central position where his awareness could cover multiple angles, while the others formed a loose perimeter designed to force Sarah into a kill zone. Assessment parameters: active weapons. Are live with non-lethal settings. Medical teams standing by. Begin. Sarah moved immediately, not toward cover as her opponents expected, but directly toward the three-crin coordinator. In her experience, disrupting command and control was always the first priority in multi-opponent scenarios. The insectoid's compound eyes tracked her approach while his mandibles clicked rapid coordination signals to his teammates. Plasma bolts from the Kadaran's heavy weapon scored the ground around Sarah's position. But she was already moving in patterns that made targeting calculations difficult. The Etherian telepath attempted to establish mental contact, seeking to predict her movements through psychic intrusion. Sarah felt the alien presence brush against her consciousness and responded with a technique she'd learned during gang warfare in Neo-Singapore's underground compartmentalization. She isolated her tactical planning in a part of her mind that the Etherian couldn't access while maintaining surface thoughts focused on irrelevant details. The confusion this created in the telepath's coordination gave Sarah the opening she needed. She reached the three-crin's position just as the Saurian emerged from concealment behind her, expecting to find her distracted by the mental assault. Instead, he found Sarah spinning to meet his attack with a move that demonstrated why humans had survived 3 billion years of environmental pressure. Her combat awareness wasn't limited to single opponents or linear thinking. It was a sphere of constant threat assessment that processed multiple variables simultaneously. The Saurian's ambush predator instincts were perfect for surprise attacks. Against unsuspecting prey, they were inadequate against a species that had evolved assuming everything was trying to kill them. Sarah's counterattack disabled the Saurian with a nerve strike that temporarily paralyzed his motor functions, then immediately transitioned into a grappling maneuver that used the three-crin's own momentum to send him crashing into a support pillar. The insectoid's coordination network disrupted. His teammates found themselves operating without central direction. The Aquarian specialist attempted to use vertical mobility to gain advantage, flowing up a structural support with liquid grace. Sarah responded by collapsing the support itself. using explosive charges that were part of the arena's environmental hazards. The Aquarian's adaptability was perfect for aquatic environments, but the sudden shift to terrestrial physics sent him tumbling to the arena floor. The Gravitite close-quarters specialist charged through the chaos, his dense musculature allowing him to ignore the unstable footing that the structural collapse had created. Sarah met his charge not with force, but with redirection, using his own momentum and gravitational advantages against him. She guided his massive frame into a pit trap that had been designed for environmental obstacle training. The Kadaran heavy weapons specialist and Etherian telepath found themselves facing a human who had neutralized for teammates in 90 seconds, while demonstrating combat capabilities that seemed to violate everything the galaxy understood about evolutionary specialization. Sarah didn't give them time to adapt. She closed distance with the Etherian first, recognizing that the telepath's mental abilities posed the greatest long-term threat. Her attack pattern was unlike anything in galactic military databases, not the straightforward assault of a Kadaran, not the flowing grace of an aquarium, but something that seemed to combine and transcend multiple combat doctrines simultaneously. The Etherian's defeat came through sensory overload rather than physical trauma. Sarah's movements created patterns that overwhelmed the telepath's ability to process multiple sensory inputs, essentially causing a feedback loop that rendered him unconscious. The Kadaran, now isolated and facing an opponent who had systematically dismantled his entire team, made the decision that sealed the demonstration's outcome. Instead of continuing the assault, he lowered his weapon and stepped back in the galactic gesture of tactical surrender. Assessment complete. Duration: 4 minutes, 37 seconds. All objectives achieved. The arena fell silent except for the hum of medical drones attending to the defeated opponents. In the viewing galleries, 47 species representatives struggled to process what they had witnessed. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, her breathing slightly elevated, but her posture calm and controlled. She had just demonstrated that humanity's combat capabilities weren't anomalous. They were systematic, adaptive, and utterly devastating when survival was at stake. Commander Talshin's voice resonated through the arena's communication system. The Galactic Council will now deliberate on humanity's military classification status. The deliberation lasted 18 minutes. When the decision was announced, it came with an unprecedented modification to galactic military doctrine. Humanity is hereby classified as a Type 1 military species with special designation, Adaptive, Apex Predator. All member species are advised that humans represent the galaxy's premier universal soldiers, capable of operating at peak efficiency in any envy.